You walk around your own neighborhood, but there's still this fear that he's going to jump out from somewhere. You have this constant feeling that he's out there, walking around with a knife. There is an invisible civil war raging in the streets of Russia right now. Insidious, unstoppable, deadly. Vladimir Putin promised his people victory, but what he sent them back were thousands of ticking social time bombs. Veterans. These men returned home, but not as heroes. They returned as something else. As Frankensteins. They have no medals, only deep trauma and uncontrollable rage. This tension is felt from the streets of Moscow to the villages of Siberia. Those hailed as defenders of the motherland now threaten the safety of their own families. The statistics paint a dark picture. The monster created by the Kremlin has broken its chains, and now it's tearing apart Russian society from within. Let's examine the anatomy of this social catastrophe. This isn't a chain of coincidences. This is a destruction engineering project coldly designed by the Kremlin. It all began with the infamous Project K, the Russian army's desperate solution to its manpower crisis in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and the Wagner leadership opened Russian prisons. They called on people convicted of serious crimes, murderers, rapists, violent offenders, to serve under the banner of patriotism. This wasn't standard recruitment. This was the process of equipping the most dangerous elements of society with state resources and military training. According to United Nations data, in 2024 alone, more than 170,000 convicts joined the army with the promise of freedom. That number is larger than the entire army of many European countries. But the real problem? These men are not undergoing rehabilitation. They're undergoing deformation. Thrown into the most intense fighting on the front lines, these individuals turned violence into a reflex. The use of force ceased to be a crime for them. It became the only way to survive. Now these men are returning, and the only thing they bring with them is the habit of boundless violence. Sources: United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission, Verstka Investigative Journalism, Novaya Gazeta Europe. Over the past 3 years, nearly 8,000 Russian soldiers who returned from the front have been charged with murder or aggravated assault resulting in death. Analyses by independent media outlets Verstka and Novaya Gazeta reveal the devastation caused by this return. Over the past 3 years, Russian soldiers returning from Ukraine have caused the deaths or injuries of more than 1,000 people within Russia's borders. This isn't a simple legal statistic. This is the toll of a social crisis that began within Russia itself. Of the 551 recorded deaths, 274 were direct murders. 163 were deaths resulting from serious injury. And more than half of the perpetrators? Former convicts whom Putin released from prison, declaring them heroes. The state released someone with a history of serious crimes, taught him how to use a weapon, and then put him back into a defenseless society. This is sociological collapse. Sources: Verstka Media Investigation, Novaya Gazeta Europe, Memorial Human Rights Center. The profile of these Frankensteins explains why Russian society is in a state of panic. Soldiers in Novaya Gazeta's documentary My Unwanted Friends describe themselves as zombies. When these men return to civilian life, they cannot perform ordinary human functions. Going to work in the morning, eating with their families, going to the market. Their minds are still in the muddy trenches of Bakhmut or Avdiivka. At the slightest sound, the slightest argument, the kill reflexes from the front lines kick in. One soldier confesses in the documentary, "You can leave the war, but the war never leaves you. That thing inside me constantly wants to kill someone." This confession is the clearest expression of the risk on Russia's streets. This wave of violence isn't just an increase in police records. It's a change in the structure of Russian society. In Russia's villages and cities, the person next door has become a source of fear. The threat, once posed by criminals, now comes from individuals honored by the state, invited to speak at schools. Who can you complain to? If the person threatening you is a veteran cloaked in immunity, the legal system is powerless. Imagine your average drunk also having a grenade or two in his pocket. Yes, this is Russia today. Sources: Novaya Gazeta documentary, My Unwanted Friends. Russian Psychological Association reports. In Russia, an ordinary family argument used to end with words. Now, dangerous ammunition and unlicensed weapons are present in homes. When alcohol and trauma combine with military equipment, every apartment becomes a potential risk zone. Women and children no longer feel safe in their own homes. They become anxious when they see the emptiness in their father's eyes. This is the moment of collapse for the family, the foundation of society. While Putin promotes family values, this traumatized mass returning from the front is destroying the family structure. Tens of thousands of men, prone to violence and unable to work, become a burden rather than a productive force for the economy. Employers don't want to hire a former convict who could be dangerous in a crisis. The Russian business world shuns this risky workforce. As a result, this crowd turns to illegal activities. The situation is particularly dire in rural areas. Ex-convicts returning to their villages exert pressure on the local population. In many cases, when these individuals commit crimes, instead of going to prison, they demand to be sent back to duty. And the system allows it. This revolving door system gives them a sense of immunity. When a crime is committed, the perpetrator is reinstated on the grounds of defending the homeland. This cycle breeds silent anger toward the state among the families of victims. Sources: Russian regional news networks, OVD Info, Human Rights Monitor. Cases involving women are the darkest side of this wave. According to UN reports, violent attacks against women top the list of crimes committed by returnees. Although state media ignores these stories, local sources are full of images of victimization. This contradiction creates a deep rift in society. These events aren't merely individual tragedies. They're proof that the Russian state's commitment to protect its citizens has officially failed. Here, the second-order effect comes into play: the complete collapse of the judicial system and institutionalized anarchy. The social contract, "Obey me and I will provide you with security," has lost its validity. Today in Russia, the system is on the side of the perpetrator, not the victim. The law has become a mechanism for exonerating criminals. Sources: UN Women Reports on Russia, Consortium of Crisis Centers. According to Verstka reports, courts are applying sentence reductions to 90% of defendants convicted of aggravated assault, citing having performed their duty as a mitigating factor. A judge can release someone who has committed serious violence against his wife because of his services and medals. This means the rule of law has been wiped out. On the scales of justice, the safety of an innocent civilian weighs less than the system's need for soldiers. This is creating a new and dangerous caste system in Russia, the untouchables. Veterans have a status above the law. Whatever they do, they're under the protection of the state. This creates deep mistrust among the rest of society and absolute alienation from the state. Sources: Verstka Judicial Analysis, Russian Supreme Court Statistics. The invisible victim of this crisis is Russia's security apparatus. Imagine a Russian police officer. He's faced with a drunk, armed, and aggressive man. But this man has a medal on his chest, awarded by Putin. If the police arrest him, They could go to prison themselves for insulting the army. This dilemma has paralyzed the Russian police force. Police officers no longer respond to calls, answer their phones, or even show up at the scene. A legal black hole has formed in Russia. The state's uniformed power is hiding in fear of the monster that the state itself created. If the police don't protect you, if the courts reward the aggressors, then what good is the state? This question is echoing in the minds of millions of Russians right now. Sources: Russian Police Union statements, regional law enforcement reports. This is the era of Putin's Frankensteins. This is a crisis created by the system itself. Putin made a diabolical deal with criminals to sustain the war. But the price of this deal is being paid by shattered Russian families and a decaying Russian society. The regime united the darkest elements to preserve its power. But this structure has now spiraled out of control. This mass destabilizes not only Ukraine, but also Russia itself upon their return. Strategically, this marks the beginning of a new era. Toxic veteran syndrome. This isn't just individual trauma or Afghan syndrome. It's much more deadly. Those returning from Afghanistan were professional soldiers. Today's veterans were recruited from prisons, already prone to crime, and now given a license to kill by the state. This syndrome is a social cancer in which the state has lost its monopoly on violence, and violence has spread to the grassroots. Over the next 10 years, this problem will determine Russia's internal security and stability. Sources: Carnegie Endowment Analysis, Jamestown Foundation. The Kremlin is struggling to solve this problem because if it starts prosecuting these people, it risks eliminating its ability to recruit soldiers. The administration is trapped in a dilemma of its own making: either protect its people or turn a blind eye to this structure to sustain the system. And the choice appears to have already been made. Ultimately, even if the fighting on the front lines were to cease one day, the struggle for Russia would not end, because the problem is no longer beyond the border. It's within homes, in parks, and on the streets. As one soldier says in the documentary, "The homeland doesn't know what to do with us." And they're right. The government has no plan to solve this social problem, affecting 170,000 people. They are the living nightmares of a dream. Russia transformed its own citizens, and now they have returned home. Even when the war outside is over, peace will never come to Russia, because the enemy is no longer at the door. The enemy is sitting in the middle of the room. What do you think? Can Russia survive this internal collapse? Or is this the beginning of the end for Putin's regime? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Because the war isn't just in Ukraine, it's in every Russian home. This is Global Power Report. We watch the collapse so you can prepare for what's next.